From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Kijan Haynes. The lead-up to this year's Mexican presidential elections is going to be remembered as one of the bloodiest and most brutal in history. Just a couple of days before the campaigns closed, 5 members of the Morena party were found dead in Oaxaca, all of whom died from gunshot wounds. Since the start of the election campaign last September, until now, 130 politicians have been murdered, including dozens of candidates running in these elections. Let's take a look now at how the preparations for Sunday's poll are coming along.
Reporting restrictions for Sunday's elections are now in force, and no party, alliance, or candidate is allowed to campaign. The electoral observers and civil society are all ready for what many are calling historic elections. Still, some are concerned about a repetition of fraud.
I was here last year for the Mexico State's elections, and what I saw was unbelievable. There was fraud everywhere.
Había fraude en todas partes.
The fraud concerns have increased since the National Electoral Institute's announcement that the counting for the preliminary results program, known as PREP, will be slower this time.
According to the law, the computing and counting records which feed the PREP can't be filled in until the counting of every voting station finishes.
Another concern is the theft of 24 electoral kits that took place at different locations in the states of Tabasco, Oaxaca, and Veracruz. Some authorities have tried to play this down.
This is just a minimal event. It isn't happening everywhere. It's an isolated event, period. I ask that people stop worrying about it.
In this context, civil society and voting stations, but they say they're still worried about the process.
We asked the Electoral Institute and FtS to allow citizens to participate in this stage in the committees and groups that are in charge of electronic counting.
More than 30,000 citizen observers will take part during the elections on Sunday, including 907 from abroad. At 8 in the morning, around 1,400,000 citizens will be ready to help open the voting stations.
And we hope to go live with someone from Mexico later in this program. Moving on. The Caribbean Court of Justice in Trinidad has yet to rule on an appeal filed by 4 transgender women from Guyana who are challenging the country's laws which make it an offense for men or women to cross-dress in public for any, quote, improper purpose. 5 judges of the country's final court of appeal in Port of Spain presided over the matter on Thursday. No date has been set for the ruling. The 4 women were arrested in 2009 under that law. In 2010, they asked the Guyana Supreme Court to strike down the law, which left them open to arrest. A judge ruled that men could dress in women's clothing, but not for any, quote, improper purpose. Now, that ruling did not say what constituted an improper purpose. The 39th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government for CARICOM will be held in Montego Bay in Jamaica from the 4th to the 6th of July. Prime Minister Andrew Holness takes over the chairmanship of CARICOM on July 1st. Now, that chairmanship of CARICOM rotates annually. President of the Republic of Chile, Sebastian Pinera, and President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, have been invited to attend. Among the key agenda items are crime and violence, disaster management and climate change, and the CARICOM single market and economy. The United States Senate confirmed former Nassau Republican Chairman Joseph Mondeo to be the U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It came in a voice note on Thursday evening before the senators left for the 4th of July recess. 80-year-old Mondeo was an early supporter of Trump's run for president. Trump nominated Mondeo for the post in March early this year. In his Senate hearing, he said he would seek to improve economic relations and work to reduce ISIS recruitment in the country. And attempts to elect a new Attorney General in Honduras stalled after Congress failed to reach a qualified majority of 86 votes. Opposition parties achieved a combined vote of 63 against the Commission's candidates for Attorney General. lawyer Hermes Moncada and junior Attorney General lawyer Daniel Siberian. The session has now been suspended. The election turned controversial after the mission to support the fight against corruption and impunity in Honduras launched a corruption investigation named Pandora, involving a number of current congressmen. In Ecuador, relatives, friends, and citizens gave a heartfelt farewell to the journalist team of the newspaper El Comercio at a funeral held in Quito, led by President of the Ecuadorian Episcopalian Conference, Monsignor Eugenio Arellano. Arellano praised journalist Javier Ortega, photographer Paul Rivas, and driver Efren Seguera, who were kidnapped and later executed on the Colombian border. He stressed the importance of the team's work and said, quote, "Let's look at all the men and women who work in the media, the risk of their profession, their dignity. These three have been victims in the search for truth." Staying in Ecuador, top Ecuadorian officials say that the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence's visit was very productive.
The Secretary of the Presidency explained that the main topics which were discussed with Pence were export of Ecuadorian products, migration, facing transnational criminal organization, corruption, and the request for the extradition of 44 Ecuadorians.
This visit is an achievement for the country. 60 years ago, there wasn't a working relationship between these two countries. The United States is the most important business partner our country has.
The authorities also affirmed that the country is interested in promoting foreign investment that promotes jobs development. As for the trade agreement, they said it offers beneficial results to increase exports as higher national production generates higher income.
With regards to the fiscal situation and external debt, it's impossible to think that the Ecuador can get out of the situation without financing, and that financing has to be in the best conditions.
I have requested in the most cordial way that the Commercial Investment Council begin to negotiate for a positive commercial agreement for Ecuador. We do not talk about a free trade agreement. We are talking about a bilateral commercial agreement.
Several lawmakers expressed concern about the measures that have been passed by the Assembly and also for the announcements made by the government.
We're concerned that Ecuador doesn't have its clear developmental priorities. We have to ensure that what we get is based on the needs of Ecuador and not about what others hope or want to decide for the Ecuadorian people.
The Secretary also said that the donation that will make to Ecuador still have to be analyzed. Pence announced almost $7 million will be donated to Ecuador for corruption, security, and migration. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
And after his visit to Ecuador, the U.S. Vice President met with Central American Presidents Jimmy Morales of Guatemala, Juan Orlando Hernandez of Honduras, and Salvador Sanchez Creen of El Salvador in Guatemala City. Pence urged the leaders to dissuade their people from attempting to enter the United States illegally. He added that migrants from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador are claiming asylum, but few are really fleeing persecution. The U.S. Vice President said that since the beginning of the year, more than 150,000 people from these three countries have arrived at the southern border of the United States. And the president of El Salvador, Salvador Sanchez Creen, once again asked for the rights of migrants to be respected.
As a government, we have asked for the human rights of our migrants to be respected at all times, and today this petition has been ratified. This results in motivation to continue developing, broadening, and strengthening this strategy within the confines of complying with responsibilities of the prosperity of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala.
Mario Rosales has more from Guatemala City.
Human rights and migrant activists and organizations have strongly criticized the meeting between the leaders of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. They say this meeting will not go further than an official photo and that migrants will continue to leave the region in an attempt to reach the United States. The U.S. hasn't sent a reconciliation message that actually aims to respect migrants and guarantee their human rights. Until now, we have witnessed dramatic scenes of children being torn away from their parents in detention centers in the U.S. southern border. Activists say this meeting has a single objective for Washington, to say that they will not allow entrance to migrants from Central America and that there will be no real dialogue to stop the exodus of people. Activists say this meeting has a single objective for Washington, to say that they will not allow entrance to migrants from Central America and that there will be no real dialogue to stop the exodus of people. Activists added that the government of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are not doing enough to avoid people fleeing violence and poverty in their own countries, facing dangers as they pass through Mexico and human rights abuses as they reach the U.S.
Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
México ha expresado su más enérgica condena a cualquier trato cruel e inhumano hacia cualquier migrante, en especial hacia aquellos más vulnerables.
Decidido y presupuestar.
Welcome back. So no matches today in the Russia World Cup, but the fans have been keeping busy all the same. Jose Daniel Lopez has our World Cup special.
Thank you, Kitchen, and welcome to our Telesur Russia 2018 special World Cup coverage. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez, and here are today's headlines. Local and international fans competed in their own mini World Cup tournament in St. Petersburg. The Fan World Cup aims to shame negative perceptions of sports tournaments and encourage greater interactions and friendship between fans. Participants included fan teams from Australia, Russia, Nigeria, Peru, among others.
The team is very excited. We want to win this tournament because it's the first time we are taking part in such an event. It's very well organized with various countries. I think there's around 14 countries here. The team will put all its force into winning this tournament because Peruvians are mighty like that.
This World Cup is actually a World Cup that breaks many bad stereotypes. For many fans of other states, it breaks any stereotypes of Russians as a cold, unfriendly, and faraway place. They see that Russia is a comfortable and safe country for tourism with very welcoming people.
An unfortunate fixture of this World Cup is the reported incidents of sexual harassment against women. Many female journalists and fans have reported different types of abuse in public spaces. One example is journalist Julia Shatilova, who says she was groped and forcibly kissed while on camera.
They jump on you, try to kiss you, to grab you. It has turned into some sort of entertainment, some kind of game with female journalists. What is happening here is rather embarrassing, especially at night.
I think it's not about the Me Too movement in that case, but about a more serious campaign for basic rights and personal boundaries that people have or should have regardless of gender.
Although Bolivia's national team is not taking part in the World Cup, football fever has spread across the country with giant big screens set up in various municipalities so that fans can watch the matches.
While Bolivian football fans may not be able to enjoy their national team at the World Cup, they have chosen new teams to follow and cheer for.
The best-selling jerseys are those of the national teams of Germany, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Portugal and France. As you can see, our shop has all the jerseys and fans can't get enough.
This is one of the spaces used to watch the World Cup, at the Cultural House in La Paz.
I couldn't make it home and I saw the ad, so I went in to watch the match, because it would have taken me too long to get home. It is a good initiative.
It is a great idea so that everyone has the chance to watch the World Cup. My favorite team is Brazil. Go Brazil!
The municipality of La Paz has set up different locations to watch the matches live. It could set up more places as the World Cup continues.
There are more people coming for every match, and we think this would increase during the knockout stage, and especially during the final. We hope to have a new space for all fans to watch the finals together.
Football is the king of sports in Bolivia. The national team has competed in 3 World Cups, 1930, 1950, and 1994.
Former FARC members and their families enjoy Colombia's participation in the World Cup. They gather together in their peace camp near Bogota to celebrate their home team's victory against Senegal, qualifying for the knockout stage. Following a peace deal with Colombia's government in 2016, the Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons turned their attention to farming and social activities. During the show De la Mano del 10, Argentine football legend Diego Maradona held an exclusive interview with former Brazilian player Ronaldo and talked about the importance of future football generations.
Ronaldo, please tell me, how do you see Brazil?
I saw them well. I think that the first 2 matches, they were very nervous. They are young lads that are playing the World Cup for the first time, and it's noticeable. You can notice that they are very nervous, particularly during the matches. They have missed many basic things, and particularly in their finishing. And during the matches, we have had close to 20 chances on goal, and 18 we haven't even hit the goal. And these are terrible statistics, particularly when finishing is regarded. But I think that as play progresses, we will also be able to become better. Yes, absolutely, I just kept the story going. And now, the young lads now have to keep on making their own history. Because we have Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, Neymar, and they have to keep on carrying football and progressing with the history. Because there are millions and millions of children throughout the world that are trying to find and fight for that dream and aspiration and opportunities within football.
Tomorrow, the round of 16 begins with 2 matches. Lionel Messi and Argentina will try to advance to the next round facing France. And Uruguay will face Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal in the city of Sochi. Argentina training session before heading to Kazan for the round of 16 match against France. Head coach Jorge Sampaoli talked about Messi's performance.
I'm sure that France have their plans to neutralize Leo Messi, but we have our own plan to make his life easier. So let's see who has better luck executing their plan. But I repeat, Argentina has the best player on earth, but we also have other players that can make France's life difficult in other facets.
Uruguay also held their last training session before their match against Portugal. Some players talk about team effort and football skills.
We are a very strong group, very united, and that's what has brought this team forward. Whichever way you play it, we are going to be ready for this occasion.
We are talking about the last European champions, and that's enough. From our side, we will try to be at our best level because it will be a very good match.
And that's all for today's Telesur Russia 2018 headlines. Don't miss our exclusive show, De la Mano del 10, the World Cup according to Maradona, only on Telesur English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Back to you, Kitchen.
Thanks a lot, Jose Daniel. Now, let's move on to El Salvador, where students are taking to the streets in protest against a bill that would privatize water.
Students at the National University of El Salvador gathered to demonstrate and block the roads as part of the broader struggle against the privatization of water.
As students, we should be aware that water is a right and that we shouldn't allow the right-wing Arena Party and the business interests to get away with privatizing water. We need to let people know that this isn't just a struggle for young people, but for the whole of society.
The students were joined by the university authorities in supporting the widespread demand to block the privatization, which has been proposed by the right in parliament to benefit the private sector.
The logic of the private sector is maximize profits, not the welfare of the population in general. If we allow this, they will come next for other services like education and health. So we're going to step up this struggle.
The community water boards, which are responsible for water distribution in rural areas, are demanding that the National Assembly recognizes them. And they say they are not happy with being excluded from the new body that would administer the water system.
It is not fair that they are debating a new water law, while the most vulnerable sector, which actually benefits the community, is not taken into account. We are demanding that they include the rural sector in this new water administration that is in the law, and if possible, in its decision-making.
In recent weeks, social movements, environmentalists, the universities and the church have all raised their voices to prevent the right from passing a water law where the body in charge is dominated by the private sector.
Israeli forces shot and killed 2 Palestinians, one of them a 14-year-old boy, and wounded 415 others during protests along the Gaza border on Friday. Gaza medical officials said the 14-year-old and a 24-year-old man were hit by live bullets. They added that 4 other men who were wounded by live ammunition were in critical condition. The Israeli military had no immediate comment on Friday's protests, and a spokesman said a statement would be later issued. Gaza officials say Israeli troops have killed at least 135 people since the weekly protests began on March 30th. After a long and exhausting session at the European Union headquarters in Brussels, EU leaders have agreed on a deal on migration. The leaders agreed to share out refugees arriving in the bloc on a voluntary basis and to create controlled centres inside the EU to process asylum requests, accommodating the demand of Italy's new Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. The members also agreed to share responsibility for the migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea. And even though the European leaders hailed the migration agreement as a victory and a breakthrough, experts say the deal lacks detail. It doesn't specify how the migrants will be shared out, who qualifies for asylum, and how the detention centers will be managed. The agreement also calls for migrant processing centers in North African countries, such as Libya and Egypt, but it's unclear if the African countries have been consulted or agreed to it. And as the EU celebrated its deal in Brussels, Libyan Coast Guard said it believes around 100 migrants drowned off the coast on Friday. 14 survivors were rescued. New figures from the International Organization for Migration estimate that 972 refugees have drowned in the Mediterranean this year. 635 of them were trying to reach Italy. It puts the total number of refugees reaching this year at 45,000, much less than in previous years. On the second day of the EU summit, leaders were discussing bloc trade ties with the US, the EU budget and negotiations for Brexit. We go now to our correspondent in Greece, Hibai Abde, for more on this.
At least 100 people have died off the coast of Libya, only 10 hours after the European Union celebrated reaching an agreement on immigration policy that establishes, amongst other things, that organizations in charge of rescuing migrants from the sea have to deliver them to the Libyan authorities. That's not the only controversial point in this agreement. Another one is that EU nations will no longer be obliged to accept a mandatory minimum number of refugees. This is a victory for racist governments such as Viktor Orban's in Hungary, that have so far refused to take in one single refugee, and now that this has been made into a voluntary decision, they're getting away with that. The nations also agreed on establishing detention centres inside the EU using communal funds, which will be used to decide which refugees can request asylum and which will be considered irregular migrants and be deported back to their countries. And yet another controversial point is the creation of similar detention centres outside the EU, in Albania or Northern Macedonia, or even in North African countries like Libya, where, according to the United Nations, there are slave camps and human trafficking sites. Having discussed immigration on Thursday, on Friday the leaders are focusing on the economic situation of the Eurozone and a possible European Monetary Fund.
That report there from Greece. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Keishan Haynes. Thank you for watching.
Mexican city